Welcome and good afternoon. This is the Benedictine Value panel discussion. This time is set aside for us to learn about, recognize, and celebrate our college's namesake, St. Scholastica's Feast Day. Most of you should know that she and St. Benedict, the author of the Rule of St. Benedict, were siblings. The Benedictine tradition is our roots, it's our nourishment, and it can be the light at the end of many tunnels. Our mission states, shaped by the Catholic Benedictine heritage, the College of St. Scholastica provides intellectual and moral preparation for responsible living and meaningful work. The banners you see enveloping us communicate the values we aspire to and are derived from the rule. Our discussion today will be shaped by our mission and informed by our values. Students, staff, faculty, administrators, community members, and guests, welcome. We're glad you're here. A special welcome to the Sisters of St. Scholastica Monastery in attendance, President Geary, the Mission Integration Committee who are hosting this experience, and our esteemed alumni panel members, whom I will introduce in a moment. We as an institution are blessed with a unique, deep, and rich heritage that calls for growth and action. Today, through the stories of our panelists, we hope to learn about how this place, the College of St. Scholastica, and its people, like you and me, can be beacons of thoughtful deliberation, inspiration, and hope as we all move through the uncharted waters of our futures. I'm John Bauman, Assistant Professor of Education, and I'll be the moderator of today's discussion. Please take note of the two microphones here on the floor. You are welcome to come to the microphones at any point. You don't have to wait until the end to ask a question. Those of you on Zoom, we are monitoring the chat button, and we will include you as well. Some ground rules for this experience. Your phones and devices should be silenced and put away, unless you're using them to take notes or as an assistive technology. As a community, we respect and appreciate the voices of all and seek understanding rather than disagreement. That being said, growth sometimes requires a bit of pain. We can and should support one another in our shared growth. Lastly, please stay for the entire experience if you can. It helps all of us to listen, focus, and pay attention. To our panelists. Charles, Chaz, Richard Lemon Jr. is a husband, father, dean, coach, and sees himself as an educator of the hidden curriculum. Chaz graduated from the college in 2013 with a Bachelor of Arts degree in communications and a minor in history. He competed in football for the college and was honored as an outstanding defensive lineman in 2010 for the Saints. He was recently named to the College of St. Scholastica's All-Decades team as well. Chaz was also a member of the Kaleidoscope Multicultural Club during his time at St. Scholastica. After graduating, Chaz started coaching football at Washburn High School while working in a Level 4 EBD setting for the Minneapolis Public Schools. Chaz went on to marry his high school sweetheart, Anna Lemon, and they now have two sons, Mason, who is 3, and Carter, who is 1. They live in Edina and enjoy spending time with their friends and family. Chaz works at De La Salle High School, from which he graduated in 2009. He is currently the Dean of Student Life and has been in an administrative role at De La Salle since 2015. Chaz is very passionate about education, football, and equity. Please welcome Chaz to our school. Laura Johnson on the end is a mother, wife, Korean adoptee, seasonal runner. I hope we hear a little bit about that. Netflix junkie, houseplant enthusiast, and a saint for life. She's been a part of the St. Scholastica community for 17 years and is currently works as a staff member in the Office of Alumni Engagement. She earned an undergraduate degree in communication in 2006 and, having had so much fun here, found herself back in college in 2008 to begin an MBA. That same fall, she was hired as an admissions counselor, which proved to be a perfect fit, recruiting students to attend the school she herself had been drawn to as an 18-year-old. In 2016, she transitioned out of admissions and into alumni engagement, a field that has allowed her to share her love for the college with fellow alums around the globe. She considers St. Scholastica to be a unique and transformative place in that it graduates students who want to continue to come back and be part of its Benedictine community. She is married to a fellow saint, Keith, who works as a psychology teacher in Superior, and together they have two unruly but adorable kids, Layla and Felix. Please welcome Laura. Jessica Johnston, we owe a great debt to. She stepped in today to help us have a third panelist. Ollie was not able to make it today. So if you saw the advertisements of Ollie Myers being our third panelist, he was until this morning. All is fine. He's doing okay. Jessica Johnston is a 2008 Bachelor of Arts Psychology minor with a Women's Studies minor. In 2016, she went on to get her Master's of Ed in Student Affairs from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. She served in housing. She actually lived in student housing from 2008 to 2011, helping our undergraduate students. And she works in the Office of Advisement here at the college and is the vets, what's the title? The vet coordinator for our veterans. It's a deep calling for her. She has family and friends who have been veterans, and she does a great job at it. She's passionate about women's rights, about yoga, about puzzles, which is fun. And as an undergraduate, she was involved in the Academic Role Model program, which we no longer currently have, but it was kind of like a tutor or a support structure for students who are having difficulty. Jessica stood in, so her advisement job does a great connection there. She was part of the Psych Club, and she was in the Third Wave Club. Please thank Jessica for coming today. On to the questions. Remember, there are two microphones down here, and you are welcome to join us in the conversation by asking our panelists questions. So, panelists, thank you for everything you went through to get here today. All of you. So the first question, please tell us about an experience you had as a student here that exemplifies at least one of the college values. It may have been a relationship that was cultivated with a member of the college community, an experience that helped you to grow as a person, a class that challenged you, a co- or extracurricular experience, or one that simply just stands out in your memory. Tell us a story.
Hi, everybody. Oh. Can you hear me? Okay. So I am from Duluth. I'm from the Twin Ports. And I had kind of a unique experience in that I was a commuter student. So I lived at home in an effort to save money and commuted to and from my classes each day. And while this worked and it was fine, I would say it was really, really challenging to get to know my peers. You know, I was spending time with my fellow classmates in the classroom, but there's so much that happens, you know, from your experiences beyond the classroom, you know, and there's inside jokes and there's things that happen in the dorms that I felt like I wasn't really a part of. So on a whim, I think my sophomore year, my second year, I went to a Halloween production. It was a midnight Halloween production of Dracula in our theater. And I was so blown away. It was a really incredible experience. I think it was the first theatrical production that I'd seen here on campus. And I felt really inspired I felt like I wanted to be a part of that. And so when spring semester rolled around, I decided to audition for the next show. And I was cast as the lead in this really quirky, adult humored show called Wonder of the World. And I really found my community. I found a group of students who, I didn't know, but really embraced me as one of their own. And I felt like all that I had kind of missed out on by being a commuter student and by not having the on-campus shared experience that a lot of my fellow classmates had had, I was able to have, and I was able to find with a bunch of quirky theater kids. And so it's fun, when I reflect back on my time and I look at what I was doing at that moment, a lot of those same students, a lot of those same kids that I was in shows and productions with, I'm still friends with, and we still stay connected, and so it feels very full circle to see that community extend long after I graduated here.
And I'll build off of that. I also was a commuter and struggled to find community. St. Scholastica wasn't the first school I picked. I was a first-generation student. Neither of my parents went to college, had no idea what they were doing. I had no idea what I was doing. I found a community in the cities and thought, this is perfect. I'm going to break free. I'm going to do this thing that everyone said, you're supposed to go away. You're supposed to have this magical experience. I went there and I realized the community wasn't what I needed. I was in a place where I was struggling with an eating disorder. I was struggling with depression, anxiety, and trying to figure out what I needed to be my authentic self. I didn't maybe use that word then, but that was where I was feeling, and just like, what is going on? Needless to say, it didn't go well, and I ended up back in Duluth a month later, and I was someone who succeeded in high school. It wasn't a hard thing for me, and so to find myself back having essentially failed my first semester of college was a really awakening experience. So I took that and I decided, all right, Scholastica's right down the road. My parents both really wanted me to go to Scholastica to begin with, so let me check this out. January rolled around. I found myself at new student orientation where David Bauman, my now boss, was helping me register for classes and start out, and I knew that what I had done in the cities didn't work. And I knew this because I didn't feel like myself. I wasn't using the resources everybody said I should be using. I wasn't happy. And so one of the things I did was I decided I was going to go to the CJL and I was going to try one of these clubs. All these people in here seem really happy and very communicative, and I never saw anyone rejected from there. So I went in, and sure enough, I found some folks who had some shared experiences. And as a commuter student, I didn't have that residential life experience, so I had to make it work. And this community provided the space for authentic growth that I wasn't sure I was ever going to get in the city. So I came here and found really that place I needed to be challenged, to heal, to find myself. And so when I think about my experience at St. Scholastica and the experiences that really built to who I am, it was this community that had everything I needed if I was willing to go out and ask for it. And to walk in the CJL and be like, hi, I don't know anyone. Well, like, what are you all doing? And that was a risk. And I think we all have to take those risks in our life to figure out who we are and to figure out where we belong.
Thank you for sharing. Is this on? Can you hear me? All right, so I'm going to piggyback off that. My value that I'm going to speak about is community. And so first off, I'd like to thank just St. Scholastica for inviting me back. For the people that know me and my experience, it was different at Scholastica. And so if anything, I'm just going to stay from the get-go, I'm going to stay authentically true to myself and just how I present and how I speak and I'm just going to stay in that mode. So I'm just going to tell you guys right now, if you get points marked off on your Dignitas papers, because I said finna and you put that in your paper, let me know and I'll email your professor. And so, I just want to open with that. And so when we talk about community, it was very different for me. I'm from Minneapolis. I grew up in South Minneapolis. I went to Seward Montessori. I don't know if you guys know where that is. That's in Riverside, Minneapolis. And so at Seward Montessori, there was a huge Hmong and Somali population, and it was just a very diverse school. It didn't look like what I'm looking at now, right? And so that's not a knock. It's just the reality of the situation. And so then I went to De La Salle High School, a very diverse school, right? And so that is my foundation of like education. I always saw diversity, right? And so then I came to Scholastica, which my journey here was interesting as well, because back then in high school, I thought I was going to play Division I football, and I thought I'd go to the NFL. I missed 7 games my senior year. Didn't even decide I was going to go to St. Scholastica until they sent me the application. All I had to do was sign it. It was really convenient, actually. So, and so like I really believe in like fate and just taking that leap, and that's what I did at Scholastica. And for me, I wouldn't have survived up here if it wasn't for football, and that's just the truth for my story. And so we also have to put it into context, and if you guys ever have questions about just kind of what it was up there, feel free to ask. I'm an open book, I will tell you. And so I graduated from here in 2013, so Obama was still in office. You got to put that into context. Because Obama was in office, we technically, in that time, the speech was we lived in a post-racial society. Well, that wasn't the reality that I was living in. And so realistically, that's what I had to deal with in Duluth, right? And so at Scholastica, I've found community because there was people there that accepted me, right? For the people that knew me, right? And so let's just be realistic. I had dreadlocks as well, and I'm from the cities, and I'm black, right? And so it's very easy for people that didn't know me to stereotype me. And so for me, I really found that community within the football team. And so I could be authentically true to myself. If I had an issue, I could go to Coach Carlson. I could go to any of those teammates. One of my teammates here, shout out Matt Johnson. And so that's like part of the community. And so I'm 10 years out from this now. And so, yeah, I still have people that I can call that'll come and support me in a moment like this. And so for me, the biggest thing that I take away from Scholastica and community is like football and how that's kind of, in a sense, changed the college in whatever way you choose to perceive it. But I think it's been a very positive thing. And so that's my answer for now.
Thank you to all three of you. So I'm hoping you're starting to realize the value of the alumni panel and the discussion we'll have today. So we started with a generally softball question. We're going to move into some harder ones as we go. Anything on Zoom? Okay. I noticed the microphones are still standing there all by themselves. If you'd like to keep them company and ask a question, feel free. It's okay. I invite you down. Come on down. Thank you for sharing those very personal stories. A great deal. Which value do you consider vital to your life? Think about family, think about relationships, think about work. What role does that value play and how does it influence your actions? Now, one caveat. We have 5. I'm not limiting you to 1. Okay? Mm-hmm. All right.
You repeat the question. Yep. I had spilled water on myself. I don't know about that.
You are not alone.
Yeah, no.
Which value do you consider vital to your life? Think about family, think about relationships, think about work. What role does that value play, and how does it influence your daily actions?
Okay, so I am training for my 2nd marathon in June. And I ran one when I turned 30, and I thought, I'll try it again when I turn 35, and maybe my body will still cooperate when I'm 40. But for now, I'm just focused on here and now in June. And I like running, but I really love podcasts. And sometimes I think podcasts are the vehicle to get me to go for a run, especially if it's a solo run where I am running without friends, without company. So I would say, when I think about personally and when I also think about professionally, working in an institution of higher ed, I think the love of learning is probably one of the values that resonates most with me. And where I find a lot of value in podcasts is it's someone telling you a story. It's someone basically, my kids are 6, 7. My daughter just turned 7 yesterday. 7 and 3. And they love to be told stories. They love to be read stories. And I feel kind of like a kid when I'm listening to a podcast, when I'm running on the lake walk, or when I'm putting in miles over in the Burns Wellness Center. I love to hear like Malcolm Gladwell's voice, or if anybody in here listens to My Favorite Murder, I'm a fellow murderino. And I think that when you listen to those stories, you're always learning, and you're always taking back with you stories that you can then share with your coworkers and with your friends. So I would say that value speaks a lot to me personally as I gear up for training for my marathon. And then also, being a parent, I think more about stewardship than I probably ever had before. And I think a lot about the world that I'm leaving, not just the world, globally from a global perspective, but I think a lot about our community here and what kind of Duluth, Minnesota am I leaving for my daughter and for my son and for their children someday. And so I'm much more aware, I think now as a parent, about my footprint. And like many people, after the new year, I watched Tidying Up on Netflix, right. And so thinking a lot about things that spark joy for me, and being able to donate and kind of upcycle things that I don't has been, I think, especially poignant to me since January 1st.
Just even the way I folded my stuff, because I watched Tidying Up when I came up here. So just to piggyback, I could easily say love of learning as well, but for me, respect. I feel like I learned a great deal of respect here. Just think about the environment, Tower, the sisters, right? This is a holy place, and so just even this campus, I feel like I learned to respect a divergent view. Coming up here was a culture shock, right? And I could have easily ran away, went home, but then I learned to respect the people of Duluth. I can't be mad. This is the way it is up here. And so if anything, I learned to respect others, and then through that, people could respect me for who I really was. And so for me, the biggest thing I think I've taken away from St. Scholastica is respect. And so, and I want to say hospitality as well. And specifically, I want to talk about Coach Heff and kind of what he's done even since he's been back in the role in football. And so the welcomeness that I feel in that regard to even come back to the college, if I'm honest, prior to, I might not have come back, right? Just because of the relationship that I had with Coach Carlson. And then things happened, and then now Heff's back. And so the hospitality that I've felt through that, and now that I'm able to do at De La Salle through my own dean work, well, how am I going to treat you guys if you come visit me at De La Salle? Well, you're a Saint, so if you ever come visit me at De La Salle, you're automatically an Islander now as well. And so it's treating each other with that respect and showing that the love of learning, that we're all interconnected in some way, but then still respecting our differences.
Yeah, they all go together. I think that's one of the challenges I have, is pulling them apart, because they all are needed. And when you said at the beginning, responsible living and meaningful work, I think that's the phrase that resonates most with me. I remember seeing that in Summers Hall as first student orientation. It was I don't know what I want from my life, but if I could be doing those things in this way, I feel like I would be contributing to the world and being a saint. Love of learning drew me to this profession. I worked in housing and decided I wanted to pursue that academic side. So I went to La Crosse and got a master's degree specifically in colleges and how do colleges operate. And we talked about those stewardship and hospitality because they're integral to creating a learning environment and to being the place that we are. And I think we're lucky to have these phrases as common language that we all have, right? You talk to any of your alum friends and they all know the 5 phrases, and if nothing else, leaving CSS with those ideas I think is so cool.
I think all 3 of you really touched on a really important point, that they are interconnected, that they're dependent upon one another, and if one is lacking, the other 4 will not grow to the capacity that it could. It's important that we are intentional with how we live, and it's important that we have a context to name that, a common language. And this is how our institution uses that language. It's how we contextualize our expectations. Other places call these things different things. They are universal values. We are lucky to have the heritage of the Benedictine tradition and the Benedictines leading our way to give us that context for the conversation. We're blessed that way. Are you ready for the next one? Mm-hmm. Okay. So please share with us a recent personal or professional ethical dilemma that your experiences at CSS helped you to resolve. How did your exposure to our values, experiences in this place, and growth as a person while here influenced how you approached and resolved that dilemma? Keep in mind that the ethical dilemmas generally have very hard decisions for those of us trying to make one. There is no black and white, right and wrong. It's usually a mixed up mess of gray area where there's always someone being hurt and someone being benefited. And those ethical dilemmas are the ones that are the hardest to make because of that space in the middle. An ethical dilemma.
Well, I'm a DINA student, so I have to be careful what I say. So I'm going to speak in real general terms. And so I'm going to hop on to piggyback of football. And so one thing we've in the football program, we really pay attention to detail, right? And the little things, not stepping on lines. And so what I didn't understand how much that translated into like my everyday work as a dean, paying attention to detail, making sure I get all that information right. But then it's in the fashion of like how you do it. And so what I mean is like taking that extra time and care to like focus on what you're doing. And so one thing I can remember specifically when Coach Heffernan, we changed our warm-up. And so he was being serious. If any player stepped on the line, we would start the whole warm-up over. And we all thought he was joking. We probably started over 3-4 times. But then that allowed us to like pay attention to like take care of the little things. And that's what turned that program from 1-7 to 10-0 in less than like 3 to 4 years. And so it's sometimes the small things can make the big things way easier to deal with. And so like at De La Salle, I'm really big on the small things. And so if we can tuck in our shirts on a daily basis, when a kid gets in trouble for doing something kind of big, well, it's way easier to take care of that big thing when we're doing the little things right.
Jazz, can you continue on and talk about how you shared with us earlier, if you're willing to share this, the dynamic change that was made to lunch hour?
Yes. So at De La Salle, private Catholic school, we pray before everything. And so we always say, let us remember the Holy Presence, God, in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Pray, and then we always end St. John Baptist De La Salle, pray for us, live Jesus in our hearts forever. So at De La Salle, we calculated we probably prayed, I would say over like 20,000 times, right? And so they pray in every class. And so for lunches, we have a period system 1 through 8, and we have lunches 4, 5, 6. And so this year, I was like, we're going to pray before lunch. And everyone thought I was crazy, right? And so my whole argument was if they can pray before Pep Fest, if they can pray before class, if we can pray before like school gatherings, I guarantee you I can get a whole lunchroom of kids to be quiet and we will pray. And so I'm not going to say who doubted me because this is going to be on YouTube and Zoom. But then there was a question whether I could sustain this or not, right? And so I was saying to Mr. Bauman, we should FaceTime in the De La Salle right now at lunch, and I guarantee you they're praying. And so it's more why I try to do that too, is then it's like, it kind of is a calming sense. And so this year I heard a staff member say, well, it's actually really, it's calmer in the lunchroom. And someone said, well, that's because lunchtime prayer. So I came out the woodwork like, and so change is always like hard for people, but then it's like sometimes change is important. People might not like it, but then once you take that leap of faith and you kind of just have that faith that things are going to work out, things kind of play out. And so what my hope is after I leave De La Salle, because De La Salle was there long before me, Scholastica was here long before me, it'll be here long after me, so will De La Salle. And what my hope is they'll continue to like pray. And so it's those little things that make a huge difference sometimes in the culture of a place. So.
Yeah, I think that makes me think of, those ethical decisions in the tough moments does lead to what is your culture and what do you want that culture to be like for the people who are in that community. And I know when I was a student working the residence halls, we didn't have JIVAs and we didn't have violence intervention prevention services, and when students needed those services, it was harder to get them connected with off-campus folks. And so one of the things that the institution found was just having those resources available, and that's our calling, I think, as an institution, to have those resources for our population here as a way to resolve some of those ethical dilemmas that happen just as a result of being a community.
One thing I just want to add as well, was crazy for me to think about as well when I was a senior, how much we really made a difference. So you guys, as freshman year students, can be that change, within the school. And so that's what's the coolest thing about this whole experience. You guys are just getting into the beginning of it, your first semester, right? Second semester now. It's you still have so much learning and growth to do. And so it's why can't you be that kid to make the next change at this campus?
I would maybe answer the question with a little bit of context. So the college has been on this journey towards inclusive excellence for some time, and you're stepping in as first-year students at a really kind of meaningful time in that journey. I think that the college's journey has kind of aligned with my own, in that as a transracial adoptee, having grown up in with a white family in a predominantly white community, I really thought of myself as white for many, many years. And so I felt like coming into the college community at a time when the college itself was starting to explore its own identity and who we have been, a Catholic Benedictine institution, and that's who we always will be, but how we can embrace the fact that when there's differing opinions in your class and when there are people who look differently than you and who have different backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, that enriches everybody's experiences. And so I feel like the college and I have kind of grown together in that, in kind of coming into who we are. And I don't know if this would be an ethical dilemma, but I would say, a few years ago, the students in the Asian Student Union, now it used to be called the Asian Culture Club, had approached me to ask if I would be their advisor. And I really felt conflicted. I felt like I didn't have the credibility, or I didn't have the authenticity. For so long, I didn't think of myself as Korean. I didn't think of myself as Asian. And it really wore on me, and it was a decision that I didn't make lightly, because I wanted to serve those students the best that I could, and I wanted to be the advisor that they deserved and that they needed. And so I had to kind of accept that, maybe they would accept me as I was, and that we could kind of learn and grow together. And I talked in my bio a little bit about how this community is really transformative, and I think for me it's been especially transformative because as the college has grown to become a more inclusive place, and as we see diversity, especially as it relates to race and ethnicity, interwoven into the curriculum, I too have kind of learned to embrace my identity as a Korean adoptee. And I can't imagine any other type of environment or workplace where I would have gotten to have that experience.
Would each of you, if you can think of it, talk about the dissonance that you experienced? Laura, you just mentioned some of that. What's it like when you're stuck in a situation, you're expected to be adulting, the new verb, right, adulting, where you carry the weight of everything you've thought of, you're concerned about your interactions with others, you're worried about being that lead change agent for students who are looking to you for help. What goes through your head when you're doing that? How do you make your decisions? What leads to some form of conclusion? How do you deal with the dissonance?
I think you have to step out of it, and where you might not be the person who your perspective might not matter. You have to like go to who is the person that you're working with, who is the person that you're working with most closely, and who are your stakeholders, and having that conversation about making sure you understand all of the factors involved, but also like taking your own pride and identity out of it, I guess.
I think there's a few questions, like just to kind of piggyback off of what you're saying. For me, it's like, are you safe first? Like, for me to be able to speak out, it took time. I didn't really speak out until the second semester of my senior year, and so there was safety in that. And so in context, I was a big black kid with dreadlocks. No one's really gonna mess with me, and I was playing football, so I had that protection. And so I think it took like courage, and it took the experience of what I was experiencing to have that courage to like speak out about the dissonance, right? And so I feel like what was harder with that is like I could be undermined or not heard because I was, in a sense, not of a major demographic. I didn't really have a voice. And so the biggest thing for me, I feel like once I had that voice and I had the respect, because I had built up 4 years of not getting in trouble, being a good student, and just forming positive relationships, I had then the foundation to stand on to where then I could, in a sense, stir the pot, right? And that wasn't in a negative way. If anything, I was just advocating for what I was seeing, what I was experiencing, and now that it was out there, I could call it out and it couldn't be taken away. And so with that, I just had to ask myself, am I gonna be safe? Yeah, that was fine. Is this gonna make a difference? Yeah, and so I was like, you kinda gotta do some self-reflection and be willing to take that risk. And so I'm not trying to compare this to like Colin Kaepernick at all kneeling, but it's like when he did that, he knew what he was getting ready to do. And so when I'm talking about this with my football players, like, well, are you willing to take that risk? Do you understand what's going to happen for these outside people that are viewing you? Do you have $1 million contract? Are you willing to give that up? And so you have to understand what you're getting into and be willing to take that risk. And so 2 years ago, I probably wouldn't have done this. But now I'm in a place in my life to where it's like, not that I don't care, but I'm willing to take that on. Like I've made it this far. Like I live in Edina. Like I've made it in a sense. Like I can speak out. And so not to say that Edina like made it, that was just a life choice, never mind. I'm not necessarily happy about living in Edina. I lost a lot of street cred coming from South Minneapolis, being a cake eater, so like it is what it is. And so I don't openly admit that to my students all the time. When they find that out, that's a hard conversation. Yeah, I live in Edina, right off of Benton. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to be very clear, not to say that you make it by living in Edina, because I would, hold on. I would gladly live in Minneapolis, but that's just a life choice me and my wife have made, so it is what it is. Sorry. Yeah. Next question. Y'all got questions? Want to learn more about Edina?
Laura, did you have something?
Well, I would say that we hear a lot of empowering statements to find your voice and find courage and speak out and speak up. But I think equally important and maybe not as celebrated is to embrace vulnerability. And I think, Jessica and Chaz, the stories that we've shared speak to vulnerability, especially, those first moments on campus and being in a community that's different from where you came from or where you might have started. And so vulnerability, I think, is a really relatable quality. And when someone has their heart on their sleeve, I think that as a fellow human being, that you immediately want to empathize with them. And so there's importance, sure, to being strong and being courageous, but I think when you're faced with things like cognitive dissonance and maybe your heart and your head are in different places, it's okay not to know, and it's okay to be in an okay place when you're feeling vulnerable and not to always have all the answers.
Well, and to listen. We talked about that earlier today. We were having a conversation about politics in our family as it relates maybe to our current politics, and how do we embrace in those conversations, and how do we bring our CSS education to those conversations, and making sure that we are listening just as much as we're talking, or maybe even less. Yeah.
That was a beautiful segue. We're going to take just a couple of minutes, and I want you to just turn to your neighbors, share some takeaways, come up with a question, be really brave, come up to a microphone. Take a couple of moments. Just talk to your neighbors about your takeaways.
Yeah. It's
Where does it come from?
Mighty Ducks.
Oh, I know, right?
Mighty Ducks.
It is?
Yeah, like they actually, because part of that movie is in Minnesota and in Edina. My music teacher is an extra in that movie.
Really?
So, yeah. So
It's going all right.
Yeah, how are you feeling?
I'm about to call out all these people that I think look like football players on, like y'all need to be sitting in the front row and setting an example for the rest of this college.
Relationship?
I'll change it. If they ask that question, I'm talking about football, talk about police.
Okay, so this is your experience. I have more questions planned, but thankfully we have a couple of brave people who have come down to the front. Please join them. Those microphones are still a little lonely. They could use some community and some hospitality. Which of you would like to go first?
Okay.
Okay.
So, is this working? I don't know. So, Chaz, you mentioned hidden curriculum, and I wonder if you could speak more about that?
I should do it like you said. Yeah, can you hear me now? No? It's a setup. Hello. Can't mute me too long. You can follow me on Twitter. The hidden curriculum to me is all the stuff you're not going to learn in the classroom. And so I'm not trying to knock the classroom because that's very important. But then when you're getting into education, it's more than what you just learned in a classroom. So as a dean, like I'm not teaching in the classroom, but I'm also a football coach. And so I teach a lot about life and just real life stuff that you're probably not going to learn in the classroom. And so I think that's equally important. And so that's the hidden curriculum in my sense, the stuff you're not going to learn in the classroom, the real life stuff. Not to say you don't learn real life stuff in class.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's kind of like that whole person experience. It isn't just going to class, it's being involved in clubs, it's being part of teams, it's being out there on the Senate, it's about actually living a whole life at the campus.
And for sure, realistically, I stole that from De La Salle, and so like that being a private Catholic school, it's like I had no basis of religion prior to being at De La Salle, and so that's kind of where I learned everything, what I know now in a sense about, let me backtrack, because I learned a lot from Scholastica too. But then just learning that it's like not necessarily everything about the classroom, and so learning stuff through masses and Pet Fest and how to be a community through like playing sports, and so that hidden curriculum, that stuff that you pay to go to school for, that you're necessarily like, someone has to like teach you that. Like experience is more what I'm trying to say.
Ms. Johnston, you touched briefly on politics, and we do live in a very divisive time in this country, especially with racial divides, economic divides and such. I was wondering if you could touch on how what you've learned at CSS has helped you prepare for those divides in everyday life.
Does this work? Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a great question, and I would say my experience at St. Scholastica opened me up to new lenses and new perspectives. That I had no clue coming from Saginaw, Minnesota, that there was another way of life or another sets of rules that might be out there. I think my most favorite class was taught by Sister Kathy, who is no longer a professor here. She's a sister in another a monastery, actually. And just like her coming to St. Scholastica, choosing this place, even though it wasn't her denomination, so to speak, of sisters, and coming in and sharing this story of love in a way that was totally transformative. She would start the class and be like, how are we going to make love in the world today? And everyone like kind of stared at her and smiled, and until we figured out there was a sense of humor and there was a story there and she was going to teach us something. But how are you going to make love in the world? And sometimes love doesn't look like Valentine's Day and hearts and flowers, but rather like taking the opportunity to think, this person in front of me, whether they believe in what I believe or not, has experiences, has values, and believes what they believe, and I should show love in and listen with a full and open heart, that we can have those conversations respectfully, that we can be hospitable, that we can be stewardly with our time, and we can seek that love of learning in each other and our own perspectives, because those experiences bring those perspectives, right? And so if you don't have the same experiences as other people, you're not going to have the same perspectives, and we're not going to learn unless we're actually having these conversations. So it's sort of this radical notion of like making love in the world and having challenging, courageous conversations at every opportunity possible.
The courageous conversation part is huge, I feel like, and just being okay with discomfort. You're going to have a lot of awkward moments in college. Sometimes you guys just need to sit in that and not try to defend yourself, right? And I'm talking to everyone, black, brown, white, whatever you identify as. Like, I ain't listened to country music before I came to Duluth. I love me some country music now. And so you just got to be open to, like, change, right? And so it's you just have to be open and have an open heart, open mind, and be willing to accept people for who they are, and just understand you're not going to change a person in a day. Rome wasn't built in a day. Things take time. Love takes time. Like, you got to build that. So
I shared earlier with the group at lunch that I attended a really powerful conference a couple years ago where the keynote speaker talked about this notion of calling people in versus calling them out. And I think that that's something that's really, kind of stuck with me ever since I attended, in that there's a way to have uncomfortable conversations with people that you care about, people that you're compassionate about, in a way that's not defensive or aggressive or hostile, but in a place that says, I love you, you can't say that kind of stuff around me, or something, however that conversation might be. But just the idea of approaching uncomfortable conversations from a place of love, and a place of inclusion versus exclusion, that's something that I try to keep in mind during those difficult topics.
And it's hard. Like,
it's super hard.
And having people around you who are willing to call you out and be like, you're not really being open right here, and because it doesn't come as a natural tendency. We have our own beliefs and we want to, defend them, but that's where we end up with wars, right? We have to be open. We have to have those conversations.
So back to the question, the great divide. I think all three of our panelists spoke very clearly and eloquently to the fact that we need to talk with people we may not agree with. We need to have that conversation, and we need to be open about our conversations and less worried about offending, but thoughtful of it. But listen as much as we talk. And make sure that we're talking so that others can hear our voices and we can try to find some common ground. Because without that, the divide will just grow. I'll tell you a little tiny story about my mom. My mom turned 89 in November. My dad turned 94 just a couple of days ago. When we got together for Christmas this last year, my mom announced as we walked into the room, no talking about politics. And it was my job to push back. I said, no, we need to talk about politics. I'm the youngest of 11 children. There were at least 25 people in the space. We have a lot of different viewpoints and understandings, and it was really important that we could have the conversation if we choose to, rather than outlawing it and then letting that divide grow. That's the only way through in my belief structure, is that we talk. Thank you for that. Nice job. Paul, you had a question.
I'm hearing a lot of conversation that seems to revolve around empathy and how all these are kind of connected to that word and that thought process. And I also want to know how that influences your creativity and decision making and how you solve difficult problems, especially when you want to initiate change, be it on a small scale for one person or a large institutional scale. And I think you've all kind of hinted at moments of doing that, and perhaps there's an example where you can talk about empathy, creative problem solving to initiate change.
I can start. One thing they didn't mention, I did get my master's in 2015 in education, and I did a culturally responsive teaching program, so I got a certificate in that. And I would say the empathy piece became really real for me when I had kids, right? Oh, man. And so that really changed my perspective, right, and how I was just interacting with my students and how I then treated them, right? And so I definitely think we have policy, right? I want to be careful what I say. Sometimes policy is not always right. Sometimes there's a moral decision that you have to make, and sometimes you have to go against policy to do something that's right. And so I just think about if Mason gets in trouble. So that's my son, he's 3. And I'm sure if he's anything like his dad, he might get into some trouble in grade school. High school and college, no. So just how people are going to treat him, right? And so it's like I really had to think about how am I treating someone else's son, sister, brother, cousin, whatever. And so I really think you should start with that. Well, how is this really going to impact people? I don't care what our policy says. How is this really going to play out if we do this? And so sometimes rules are made to be broken. Sometimes we got to break them to do what's morally right. And so that's how I'm going to answer that. And so it is what it is. I've gotten to the place that I am today by operating in that mode, and haven't gotten fired or anything. So I think I'm doing something right. And so I really think it boils down to the relationships that you have with those people and communication. And so if you can figure out all those things, you'll be fine.
I guess at CSS, in my role as veterans coordinator and tutoring center coordinator and academic advisor, there are often times where my roles overlap, and they also don't overlap in terms of what do I spend time on and when do I spend time on things. And it does have to be creative constantly in how I support students and what are programs we create, what are those individual conversations we create to get to that desired outcome. So a few years ago, we started the Academic Plus program on campus based on statistics we were seeing of students who weren't retaining and persisting at the level we were hoping they would do so. So we put our heads together, and this is one of my most favorite things about Scholastica is there's a community of people who, if there's a problem, we want to get together, we want to talk about it. And it really did spur from a place of empathy because we believe these students can be successful. We admitted them, we believed in them, we taught them, but maybe something was missing that we could approach on a programmatic level. And I think that's where I'm drawn in my profession to find where are those programs and those different practices, like with the prayer, to put in place that can help address maybe an empathetic concern. And so we created this program that instituted some structure that that was really the birth child of a lot of creativity. There's nothing like this program that exists. Megan Perry Spears threw out an idea, we put it together, we've tested it, we've refined it, and it's given us great outcomes and great outcomes for students. So if you're ever interested in education or working in a private college, we have lots of flexibility here to do things like that I don't think other institutions have, and have always drawn me to continue to work in this institution.
I try to think about the why, and so, when someone is, when my 7-year-old is exasperating me, I think, well, why are you acting that way? Where does that come from? What's the root of it? And I think it's less about the answer to that question, because with her, sometimes I'll never know, or with my 3-year-old son, it's just, they're a mystery. My husband likes to say they're learning how to become people, and I like that. I think that's true. And we're all, on that journey together, too. I'm learning how to be a person. But it's less about the actual reason, and more about asking yourself the question. I think when you put yourself in a position to say, well, I wonder why they believe that, or I wonder why they reacted that way when we had that conversation, I think it automatically forces you to be empathetic, and then you don't really need to know why. You know that asking yourself the question is making you come at it from a more kind of humanitarian, empathetic way, and I think we all can use that, and we all deserve to be on the receiving end of that too.
That's true. So remember, you can ask questions. I have plenty prepared. We're going to be here. Cece, do you have a question? Go for it.
Some of you have touched a little bit on family and home life. How has the CSS values impacted how you raise your family, or impact more close relationships?
I mentioned my family, and they always, they're like, you're going to Scholastica, it's great, your aunt went there, we're all going there. They were super supportive of the idea of coming to St. Scholastica, which was a surprise, so they came from a place where they weren't supportive. But then they weren't as supportive once they found out what learning actually maybe looked like. Like, I was learning things that they weren't aware of, or learning new lenses, or learning new perspectives, and I became a person maybe that they didn't recognize, and that took a little bit of time to just have more conversations and to explain sort of the hidden language or the hidden curriculum of what is college feel like, what does it look like, and explaining that to my parents, who had no idea what I would turn into. And they're like, you're supposed to just get a job, what are you talking about, all these classes, and who needs history, you're supposed to just be doing a psych major. And so being open and understanding that they're doing the best they can do. Truly, I believe that my parents, while they didn't have the exact experience, they really did want the best for me, and that came from a place of, why are they asking me these questions, and having good conversations, but maybe not every single weekend we'd have these conversations. It would be spread out over a few holidays of all right, let's have an actual conversation, but knowing that I had a path that I was trying to pursue and having confidence in that. And sometimes it was fake confidence, just to get you through, meant all the world. And then having support here at CSS that were like, you got this, you can do this, I believe in you, was all the difference. So sometimes finding the family in places outside of your family. Does that answer your question? No?
So I'm not 100% what the question was, but I think it's along the lines of what our family support was prior to coming to Scholastica. For me, it was different. And so for context, I'm the youngest of 4. And so my first 2 siblings didn't go to college. They both went to a semester, both dropped out, and both are successful in what they do now in their corporate jobs. And so then I had a brother, Cyrus, who went to NDSU, played football, ended up being a captain, and then there was me. And so Cyrus was a senior in high school when I was a freshman. And so I had that, right? And so my dad's not in my life. We could take another hour to talk about that, but is what it is. And so then my mom, in a sense, supported 4 kids and helped out when she could, right? And so, but then in a sense, she was supporting herself. So when I came to Scholastica, I didn't have much. Like I said, the college sent me the application. All I had to do was sign it. At that point in my life, I was really checked out. I had hurt my knee. I wasn't going to college. And so as far as FAFSA and all that, my mom helped. And my mom, I'm not trying to say anything, I love my mom to death. Right, but then she wasn't in a place to where she could necessarily support me financially in college. Our house had foreclosed when I was in college. I was homeless technically. And so thankfully I had the support of like my girlfriend and her family, who's now my wife, and then De La Salle, and then the overall community of Scholastica. And so, and specifically the football team. And so it's, I didn't have much support from home. Like obviously they supported me, but it's not like I was FaceTiming them. We didn't necessarily have that technology. And so when I was here, like I was at Scholastica. Like that's just what it was. And so I didn't really have options. And so my only option was to graduate and try to like figure it out. Because going back home, I didn't have a house. Like when I moved back home, I didn't know what I was doing. Like, luckily, we had support from her family, and we were able to then, I got a job, we got an apartment, and so things unfold. And so it's really figuring out how to, realistically, college is figuring out how to support yourself as well. Time management. And so there was a lot I had to like discover on my own, and thank God that there was great people at Scholastica, professors, advisors, Mary Vaughn, like people that supported me and helped me get through like college. And so not everyone has support sometimes. Just depends on like the perspective you're like choosing to look at. And so I felt support in other ways, but then from family, they did what they could, and I appreciate them for that. So.
I would say that I had kind of two families here. You know, I had my parents who happened to live in Duluth, and I could go home and I could do laundry and they'd cook me a warm meal. But I found family in my friends and in my faculty and in people like Tammy Ostrander, who took me under her wing when I was really clueless about what I wanted to study and where I saw myself ending up, but that maybe I wanted to end up in higher ed. And I think that if you're very lucky, I think that happens to you as a student, is that you have kind of your home base, but then from this community emerges another college or another college family as well. And yeah, I feel like both of you have touched on that. That was our experience.
Hi, this question is sort of, I guess, for all of you. Did you have like a moment that you can recall, like after you graduated, whether it was a situation or an experience or even like a relationship, when you just sort of went, oh, I'm applying those principles, those values that I learned when I was going to school in Scholastica?
Sorry, was there an aha moment where the values clicked in? Is that what you're asking? Okay.
For me, there was never a moment where I was just like, oh, I learned that from Scholastica. Right, and I'm just being real. Like, for me, it's like through deep reflection. When I really get to think and I have time to myself and I can think about the experience and what that value was for me, like that's when I find it, right? And so I have to like really be mindful of what I'm thinking about. And so like just the experience I had with football, it's like I can't even put that into words. Like there should be a book to start a program like that, 1-7 to go 10-0. So it's like something you kind of gotta just experience. Like it's hard to put in words.
Yeah, I would say it's less of an aha moment, but more of something really unique that binds us all together. And when I worked in admissions, you know, I would get a lot of questions from students asking prospective students if we had fraternities or sororities, and we don't. But I would say the fact that, you know, among our 28,000 alums who are living around the globe, I mean, any one of them can quickly identify the Benedictine values, and I think that that's something really special about this place and about this community and about how the values are interwoven into everything that we do, and we focus on one every year. In just as meaningful a way as, you know, a fraternity or sorority might find togetherness and tight-knittedness. So I think they're very human values, and so it's certainly something that I apply every day without even thinking about it. They're just kind of innate.
Yeah, I think in the minimal political work I do, I actually find that rooted in my experience at St. Scholastica, standing up for any beliefs that you have, and those are moments where I'm like, oh, that's where all that college experience or practice came into being. And, you know, every day in my work in advising, I feel like we live out those values, and I see it more on a day-to-day basis than an aha moment, usually.
Just to piggyback, last thing is like staying authentically true to yourself, and that's what I think I learned here. Like, people are either going to accept you or they're not. Be you. Like, do what you need to do to survive and to be successful. And if people, obviously in a positive way. I'm not telling to be negative, like, but it's if you know something's right and you value that, like, defend it to your core, and people will respect you for that.
So can you tell us a story about someone, a faculty, staff, or administrative personnel here at the college who had a lasting and deep impact on your life?
I'll start, and I won't go football for this one. I'm gonna talk about Elise Carter-Vosen. So I don't know if you guys know who that is, but I love Elise. We email every once in a while, and so I talk a lot about taking that leap of faith. And if I'm honest, like, I didn't really come to Scholastica for school. Like I came because it was an opportunity for me to have an opportunity to further my education. And so, like, I really came here for football. Like, education was not a top priority. I learned quickly that it needed to be. And so thankfully I had people like Elise support me. And so through my experience, just how I identify, like, the system wasn't always built for me, right? And so for a long time, like, I didn't believe in my own ability to be successful at school, right? And so for me to even be in college was like a huge accomplishment. I was always capable of it, but then society and schools didn't make me feel that way. And so I would say it was Elise who really made me feel valued, in the sense that it's like, she would correct papers like, wow, you're actually, like, really good at, like, writing. You should, like, say more. And so she really just gave me that love of learning. And so it's like, I didn't really like education. And so it's really funny that I work in education now. And so in a sense, it was kind of her who, like, really opened my eyes to, like, things like W.E.B. Du Bois and the souls of black folks, and really helped me when I was going through my own identity, like, issues. She kind of helped really ground me and help me figure out who I was. And so let's just put it in context. Elise, a white lady who was teaching Ojibwe classes, and, like, kind of the experience that she had in that, right? Let's just call it what it is. And so it's like, she felt passionate about that, and so I respect her for it, and I loved it, and just what she represents as a person. So, like, she was just, I'm gonna steal your word, like a shiro in a sense. Like, and so she really taught me to just, if I believe in something, like, fight for it, like, advocate for it. So I really credit her for, like, helping me discover my love for education and helping me become who I am today.
I'm going to say Deb Schrader. She was my psych advisor, and so I said I went into the CJL and just was like, hey. Another place I went was the psych lounge, and just went in and was like, hey, what's going on here? And there was a research group meeting, and they were tallying her results of the study, and I was like, what is this? I have no idea all these spreadsheets and whatnot. I was like, oh, can I help? And that led to going to Denver and presenting with her research group on one of my very first flights, almost throwing up in her lap, which was a whole nother thing. And she really taught me from that moment, like, taking risks, and I will be rewarded for risks if I try hard, if I am invested in this. So we also did pranks on her, a few of my friends. We took furniture from the psych lounge and put it in her driveway. We put weird Christmas decorations outside her door. I don't know why we did these things, but we thought we were really funny. And she took it with stride. She was into it. She loved it. And I thought, dang, I would like to be a woman like her. And funny story, we continue to be friends, and she's going to be my maid of honor in my wedding. So I think I have to give props out to Deb Schrader on that one.
So I mentioned Tammy Ostrander. I came in as an undecided major. I really had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew all the things I didn't want to do. And Tammy was assigned as my advisor. And she kept putting me in all these communication classes. And I enjoyed them. And so finally, I learned she was, like, the dean for the School of Arts and Letters and the department chair for communication. At the time, she was the department chair for communication. And so she definitely had an ulterior motive, which was getting me to become a communication major. But I think it speaks to, she saw something in me that I didn't recognize. And I think that that's a lot of faculty and staff here, is that they believe in you, and they see you for who you are, even before you might know that about yourself. She also directed the show that I was in my sophomore year, Wonder of the World, and so we got to have a relationship with her as one of my faculty members in the comm department, and then on stage in the Little Theater. And her and her husband, Tony Barrett, were also at my wedding, and I feel like we continue to have a good relationship, and she continues to be someone who's invested in my success.
I encourage each of you to find that person here on campus. Doesn't mean every single person that you have as a professor is going to connect with you that way. Good luck, feeding all of them at your wedding if you decide to get married, but try to find that person. Try to find someone you can connect with and cultivate that relationship so that it can continue to grow. Our lives as workers at the College of St. Scholastica are enriched by our experiences with you, and we hope we can offer that to you beyond just serving you as an instructor or as someone working in an office trying to help you. Please reach out. You ready for the tough one?
Yeah. Let's do
If
it.
you were to name a sixth value, we have 5. If you were to name a sixth value, what would it be and why would you choose it?
Okay, so I cheated, and I went online and I looked at some other Benedictine values from other Catholic Benedictine schools. And one of the things that we've talked a lot about today is how these all build upon one another, and they're all interrelated, and you really can't have community unless you have respect, stewardship. But one of the other values that I stole from another Benedictine institution is the value of peace, and I feel like peace really integrates well into our existing 5 in that it's difficult also to have community unless you have peace, and not necessarily, I certainly consider myself a pacifist, but not even necessarily peace in that context, but just harmony with yourself, harmony with others. I think that would make a great addition to our 5. But I didn't come up with it. Stole it.
To piggyback, and so I totally agree. The core values are all, in a sense, encompassing, and so it's really hard. It's a tough question, and my answer, I don't even think it's necessarily a value, but I'm huge on relationships, and so that's what I'm gonna say. It's like I think we should value the relationships that we have with one another, right? And so one group that I work with, De La Salle's POR, the acronym is the power of relationships, and so what I tell my students, it's almost more important to form positive relationships with adults at De La Salle than it is your peers, right? And I'm not trying to tell them you can't have friends, but it's like, at the end of the day, is Bob gonna write you a letter of recommendation, or is Mr. Lemon? Right? And so then one thing I'll say for here, you students, like, don't be afraid to talk to your professors. And so I ran into Dr. Poole into the bathroom, right? I'll never forget when I met with Dr. Poole in science and I cried in front of him because I had to write a 25-page paper on Martin Luther King, and I was terrified, right? I'd never written something like that big, and so we talked, we worked through it. Mine, like, we could turn it in chunks. I just thought the second week of class we're gonna have a 25-page paper due, so I was freaking out. And so and so in that sense, he was then I was able to humanize him, he was able to humanize me. And then another story like Miss Ostrander, right? I had to pass argumentation my senior year in order to graduate, and I needed diversity credit too. And so me having a great advisor was like, you should go on a theater trip. And so I did, and I went to London with Professor Ostrander, and she didn't know I was gonna be in her class the next semester, but I did. And so I did everything in my power to form that relationship. And every time she said something like, yeah, we should be at the museum for 2 hours, not an hour, right? And so then, so that first day of class when she walks in, and she was like, Chaz, I'm like, Professor Ostrander, right? And so then I made sure to sit in the front row and participate, and like, I didn't do great in the class, but I had a great relationship with the professor, and I would go to her office during the office hours, and I really worked at that, because I knew at the end of the day, I had to get a C+. And I don't know if you guys know anything about Professor Ostrander. She's not cutting slack for anybody, even if she likes you. And so I knew I had work to do, and so that was really important for me to form a positive relationship, like, with her.
Off of that, I would go with participation And that's part of Catholic social teaching's tenets, but I think the call to participate and to encourage other people to participate in our communities and our democracy is really important. And it also provides a little more action. I think some of these are passive, or can be seen as passive values, but participation, trying, putting yourself out there, doing an action, you'd be surprised by all that can come as part of that. And then also making sure other people can be equally participants in society.
Those microphones are lonely. Step up if you have a question. They're there for you.
Cool. I like Ed De La Salle. Cool kids in the back.
No long walks. Okay, we'll continue with my questions then. What advice do you have for our college community members? So think about everyone who's here. The employees, the administrators, the staff, the faculty, the students, people who are coming in maybe next year for their first experience at Scholastica. What advice do you have as we move forward in our lives, and as especially for our students who are transitioning through school into life outside of school? What advice do you have for them?
How much time do we have left? Half hour, okay.
Get to know yourself. The first semester of DIG is all about dignity of self, and for faculty and staff, I think it's still a very valid time to reflect on really who are you and who do you want to be, and that might change where you're going with your next semester or your next career decision, but taking that time to be like, who are you? And what do you need? And what do you need from your community? You might be surprised. And if you're going into a new environment, such as maybe when you transferred here or came here for your first semester, knowing that if you go somewhere else, you might have new challenges, but you are still the same person. And so some of the things that maybe bogged you down in a previous experience might follow you back up. So it's best that you take a little time, get to know what you need so that those things don't keep following you everywhere if you're not addressing them.
I want to piggyback off something you said before, but participate. I kind of have like a threefold answer. I could go on all day, and so that's why I asked how much time you had. So my biggest regret from Scholastica is like participation, and there's more context into why I didn't, but then I can really regret not participating and like sharing my voice and my experience earlier in my career, and knowing what kind of difference that could have made for students that were currently at the school, or for the students that came after me. And so I highly encourage you guys just to participate, and the second thing, to listen, to like hear what people are saying, and then to like in a sense empathize with them. And so I watched the Feast panel last year, and it got brought up the rule of Benedict and listening to the youngest like voice in the room. And so what I really want to encourage you guys is to use your voices. You guys have a voice, and if they're not going to listen, start tweeting at them. Right, that's public. I'm being so serious, and so that's in a sense how we kind of got the pot to like stir, and it wasn't in a negative thing. We had a very just cause that we were trying to accomplish, and so it's like I encourage you to use your voice. If you don't, like I said, like I don't really have much to lose. I will tweet it for you. It is what it is, and so if you have something that you believe in, like advocate for that. Believe in yourself and use your voice.
I love that, and I really, we hear as faculty and staff, and I hope that the message is being delivered to students too, Benedict's rule to listen with the ear of your heart. And so for me, what that means is to listen to what people aren't saying. I think that there's value in that, but it's certainly something that I try to apply professionally when I'm here and I'm my work version of myself, but then at home too. And then I also find myself anticipating what I'm going to say when I'm in a conversation, and I think we all do that. It's really easy if you have a really good point that you want to make, or you're thinking out your counterpoint in your head. And so what I've tried to do in in my marriage and in my friendships, and then also at work, is to stop doing that, to tune some of that out, and to really, really listen. And it's foreign. It feels different than it might for some of you than what you're used to, because I think sometimes we talk just to talk, And so to listen to what people aren't saying, and then to also really actively listen without having in mind what you might say next. And even that pause where someone finishes talking and you're not feeling that pause just yet, they might have more to say. And so I would encourage you to do that here in the classroom and beyond the walls of St. Scholastica. I think that there's certainly power in listening with the ear of your heart.
That was a great segue. Let's do the turn and talk one more time. Talk with your neighbors. See if there's something somebody wants to discover, and try and convince somebody to come up to a microphone with that question.
I'll Venmo the next person $5.
Let's send some more people down. Come on down with some questions.
Do it. Yeah, I do. I am wearing Chucky socks. His dad's name was Chaz. I debated wearing the socks, and I was like, whatever, yo, I'm doing it.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, sure.
Where's where the camera on? I don't, I'm not saying this is like, I'm told because it's not. Hogwarts. That's like an inside joke for like me though. Well, yeah,
Okay, we'll pull it together. We've got a couple of brave people asking questions. Go ahead.
Okay, so you spoke about having those challenging conversations. So if there's someone in an authoritative position or like a professor or something who says something maybe controversial, like, I don't know if you guys have dealt with that. How do you deal with that?
So there's so many ways to deal with situations, and I'm not talking about just here at Scholastica, but I'm talking about in general. And so what I said before, like sometimes it's hard. You don't want to like force people into like changing, because when we're talking about like power too, like maybe people in position of powers don't want to change, right? And so it's more what I've found experience in and getting results is like humanizing the experience and making people like understand. And I'm not trying to like stir the pot, but then it's and I'm just gonna say it, white people will never really truly understand the black experience. You can empathize, you can try to understand, but like just like I'll never experience childbirth, right? And I'm not dumb enough to tell my wife, you know, when I stubbed my toe, that my like toe being stubbed was more painful than her like experience of giving childbirth, right? And so when we're talking about experiences and you don't understand what that pain is, and I'm just gonna say it like as a white person, you should really like try to relate to that experience, because you can't, like it's impossible. And so I think it really depends on like the context of the situation. So it's like I've gone as far as to like recording or just like outing people like when they say something very questionable, and then in a sense it's like, well, do we want to represent, is this all what we want to represent here at the College of St. Scholastica? And I'm not saying that's what's happening, but like that's how I've approached things in the past. And so it's like you have a few options, but then I go back to, am I going to be safe? Who is this going to impact? Are students going to be like at risk if I like say something? And so it's like there's so many ways to answer that question. And I'm sorry if I didn't answer it like completely, but then in the discipline world at De La Salle, I always say there is no two situations that'll ever be the same. So I can't treat them the same. So I can't give a blanket like answer. And so it's, you kind of got to take it into context for like what the situation is. And so my biggest thing is you don't have to have an answer right then and there. And so one thing through my experience, people have tried to force me to answer like right then and there. No, you can sit with that question, sit in that discomfort.
I would acknowledge that there's power dynamic, you know, between a first-year student or second-year student, any student at the undergraduate level, and his or her professor. And so I would also acknowledge that for a lot of students, and you know, I would have put myself in this camp too, when I was 18 or 19 years old, those are really tough conversations to have, and you might not be ready to have it. You might not be ready to have that kind of confrontation, but find someone that you can tell, find someone that you trust, and it might be a peer, because I think there's some healing that takes place in just having your experience being told to someone who listens to you and who hears you and may have a similar experience that you know, it would resonate with. So I'm not gonna encourage you, you know, to put yourself in jeopardy, to put your well-being in jeopardy by having a conversation that you might not be ready to have, but I would encourage you to try and have that conversation with someone.
Maybe a student affairs staff who could process through what are processes and procedures that might be possible to go through.
I strongly encourage anyone who is feeling uncomfortable or feels they are in a situation where they can't speak up, you find those folks who can help you find your voice. And if nothing else, you just have someone to bounce it off of so that you don't feel like you're going crazy or you don't feel like you're the only one noticing it. Talk to other people, find that space. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, Chaz, love the socks.
Regrets.
So you talked about not having like financial support from like your family. I'm kind of in a similar situation. Like, how do you deal with that on top of like being academically successful, trying to get used to a new home, trying to get used to a new city, on top of that?
So I struggled a lot. I didn't eat a lot at Scholastica. Like I had probably the smallest I've ever been. I got down at one point to 186 pounds, right? And then I got up to 228, right? And so if anything, like I had some real life struggles. Like there were times where I literally just didn't eat and I was banking on them loans to come through. And so a lot of prayer, like being serious, like, you know, and having peers that like looked out for me. And thank goodness I had Hannah who would like send me like money or like order me a pizza or something. So if anything, it's like making people aware. And I had a great community back at De La Salle, right? And so more of my thing is I grew up, you didn't really like ask for handouts, right? And so it's another regret I have is that I didn't ask for help, right? And so I did one time, right? And I don't blame like the school at all, but my mom made good money. They didn't understand that she took out so many like mortgages, so then we couldn't afford to pay that off. And so it's like we had to live in the reality of foreclosure, right? But then at the same time, she made decent money, so like the school couldn't really help me. So it's like it was what it was like at that time. And so thankfully I had a great community, like within peers, professors, and personal people that knew me that helped supported me. So, and if you need something, I'll Venmo you too, though. No, like just ask.
Thank you.
So how would you describe the college and your experience as an undergraduate student so to someone who doesn't know anything about this place, who has no experience with it?
And so I'm gonna have a very different answer. And so for me, I don't know if any of you guys listen to rap music or know who KRS-One is, right? And this is not your mainstream, what you're gonna hear on the radio. That's not real rap music. So KRS talks about reality, so rhymes equal actual life in the youth, right? That's what Scholastica is for me, that's reality, right? So I talk about my experience where it was very diverse, right? And I'm talking about the cities, and outside the cities, I didn't really recognize that that's what the greater Minnesota looked like, right? And so when I came here, it was reality. It was real life. Culture shock. And so in a sense, I think this encompasses like what the real world is. And so it's like, I'm very privileged in a sense to work at De La Salle where it's super diverse. There's not many schools like that. And so it's like for me to have that framework of what I thought the world was, like that was just like wrong, right? And that was just naive, right? And so in a sense, Scholastica is reality to me. There was some real life things that happened, and it made me who I am today. And so like I wanted a real experience, yo, I got it. And so it's whether that was positive, negative, it was just reality. And so raps equal actual life in the youth.
I think this place has incredible potential, and I felt that as a student to build my own community, that there's potential for that to happen. But I also think that there are places where we could improve, that we could be doing more things on campus, that we could have more clubs, that this could be an even more vibrant community. And I think that as an alum, that's something that I would hope that you all would take to heart in some way, is like, if there isn't something here that you want to do on Friday, make it happen. You know, talk to Megan Perry Spears, talk to me, and we'll figure something out, because this place has great potential with lots of caring, thoughtful, well-intentioned young people who have passion, and let's make that happen more here. And as an alum, that's what it's all about. You know, we gave to this place, and we want to see it continue to grow and be an awesome place for lots of people. But there's a lot of potential for even more growth here.
My kids call this place a castle, so I might use that verbiage to describe it to someone who's not familiar. It does look like a castle, and it's not lost on me. You know, I've been making this drive into campus for, over a decade, and still, you know, when you crest that hill, I feel like there's a lot of kind of like warm fuzzies that you have when you drive in. But also, I would say it's transformative in that you're going to be a much different person when you leave than who you were when you came in. And that's certainly speaking to the undergraduate student experience, but I was a changed person when I left my MBA. I think when I choose to leave the college as a staff person, I'm going to be much different professional than I was when I came in. And I think it's a change for the good. I want to believe that we're all being changed here for the better. And so, I guess I would say it's a castle and that it's a transformative one, because you're going to leave different than when you came in.
Thank you. So there are some definite themes that came out of this panel discussion today. I hope you can identify them, and I hope you get a chance to discuss them with classmates and hopefully some professors and staff. If you haven't noticed, we're hosting the St. John's Bible, the Heritage Edition, down here in front today. We have a couple of hosts who can help you. You are welcome to come down and experience it. You get to turn the pages if you just make sure that you're clean before you do so and do it safely. Can you please give a warm thank you to our panelists? I won't ask them to open the gifts, but you need to know that we are very thankful, and we do have gifts for them, but we won't have it like an opening ceremony. So thank you for your time today. Have a great day.